This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo, giving you the inside track on all the big talking points from Anfield.
Hello and welcome to this week's Liverpool.com podcast. I'm your host, Matt Addison. Michael Plant and Richard Garnett are both with me. We were all so much looking forward to talking about Liverpool losing to Manchester City. We've all decided to jump on at the same time. Before we get stuck into that, though, don't forget to get the best discounts off your NordVPN plan. You can go to nordvpn.com/bloodred. Our link gives you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. And the link is in the podcast episode description box below. Don't worry, we're not just going to talk about that defeat at Manchester City. We're going to look a little bit back across some of the other fixtures as well, and a little bit forward as well towards Christmas, where it does look, at least on paper, like Liverpool might have a few more winnable games coming up than what they've just come off the back of. But Michael, I'll start with you in terms of the City game. Was City as good as Liverpool were bad? Were there any surprises for you in that game? And how much of a difference do you think it made that Liverpool came off the back of playing Villa and Real Madrid? It was the third game in a week. I think that does make a bit of a difference, and Liverpool did look jaded, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, it might be difficult to continue that kind of momentum. I suppose after 3 games, you've had to raise your levels against Villa, Real, and maybe just third time is a bit tough to do. But yeah, I mean, Van Dijk was asked that in the mix-zone after the match, and he completely rejected that thought. So, in terms of the match, I mean, I wasn't really surprised in terms of how either side set up. I suppose maybe the one surprise to me was that City's less physical midfield seemed to bully Liverpool's kind of stronger midfield. I mean that in terms of kind of Gravenberch is probably the biggest of all the midfielders that started, and then you'd say Szoboszlai is the second. So it was a little surprise for me, almost tiny little bit reminiscent of the Brentford game a couple of weeks prior, but that was the only real surprise for me in terms of how the actual game went. And I suppose the obvious one is just I was a little bit taken aback at just how poor Liverpool were. But yeah, definitely a day to forget for Arne Slot, you have to say.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk, Rich, about the disallowed goal. I think it's fair to say that the officials got that one wrong, and Liverpool should have made it 1-1 in terms of the laws of the game, at least. But I think it would have felt a little bit ridiculous had Liverpool gone in at half-time level, because there was such a level between them and City. And I know you were there. What did you make of City and how impressive they were? And were there any surprises from your end in terms of Liverpool?
The only sort of real surprise from a Liverpool perspective, I felt, was that we just, and sort of Michael's kind of touched on it already, we just didn't compete as much as I would have expected to, particularly in the midfield area. And any team that goes to Manchester City knows that they're in for a tough afternoon, and losing there is no disgrace. But a 3-0 scoreline, sadly, on reflection, is probably a fair result. And that's what concerns me the most, because I must admit, I did leave thinking, or I'll go back a little bit further, say, at half-time, Liverpool were 2-0 down. And contrary to what a lot of other people were saying, I did feel that Liverpool had possibly been a little bit hard done by at that point. They'd had the contentious penalty situation, which thankfully was saved. And then a goal disallowed at the other end, which, you know, we could argue all day about it, but, you know, it could, on another day, it could have stood. So the scoreline going in at halftime could have been different, given at how late that Manchester City's second goal came in that half. But when I look back now and looking at it over the course of the whole game, Liverpool just haven't done enough to create chances to test Donnarumma and put City under sufficient pressure. And every time City went forward, they looked like there was a chance to score, and that just didn't look like it was the case with Liverpool. And that probably concerned me the most. I mean, there were positives. So I thought. I was quite low down in the ground. I was like on row 4, so basically a pitch level. I was really nothing new here, but I was really impressed by the energy of Dominic Szoboszlai and the amount of ground that he was covering. And Salah was always an outlet, but the ball seemed to get to him too slowly, or when it did arrive, he was offside. So there was a bit of frustration and how Liverpool's sort of attacking play or the build-up of it just didn't seem as fluid as it should be. But when it comes to it, basically got dominated by Jeremy Doku, who appeared to be targeting Ibrahim Konate, and that to me appears to me where they've lost the game.
Yeah, it was interesting that Pep Guardiola, Michael, picked out Conor Bradley as being a good performer. It did seem like a lot came down that side. I mean, part of that was, as Rich says, Jeremy Doku was exceptional, and that's, I think, comfortably the best I've ever seen him play, certainly in terms of end product. He was very exciting and very direct, but it's got to be a little bit of a worry, hasn't it, that Pep Guardiola and Pep Lijnders, interestingly, had a plan, obviously, for give the ball to Konate and you can kind of stifle Liverpool and stop those attacks in that way. I mean, it's not the first time we've seen that happen, but it's not a great sign, is it, for Konate to have been exploited that easily. It's quite a basic tactic for basically Liverpool's attacks then to be stunted off the back of it.
Well, Doku's runs were typically inside rather than going outside towards Bradley. I thought it's a strange thing to say that probably Bradley and Doku were each side's both best players, and they were up against each other, which kind of very rarely happens in a football match. But whether they specifically targeted Konate, I don't know, because City typically this season have seen a lot of the ball go out left, and Doku's attacked down that side. So, but Konate's performances are just they are pretty incredible, really, because he's played quite well on a number of occasions this season, and there's a couple of times I think we've all thought, right, that's him back to his best, and then he can just put in these diabolical performances that are just full of errors. And I thought, for instance, the mistake that resulted in the penalty for City was just awful, where he booted it off Doku's legs and he came back in. I don't know. It's quite his performance levels are remarkable at the moment, because, as I say, he has played brilliantly at times, and thought he was very good against Madrid just a couple of days before. So it's a big issue for Liverpool. They're going to have to sort it, and you do wonder at some point whether Joe Gomez should be given a start, really, because he started every single game in the Premier League and Champions League this season, Konate, and Gomez is always reliable, I think, when called upon. So it's maybe something to see in those busy December fixtures, perhaps, but definitely an area of concern for Liverpool.
Yeah, there was a period of last season where Joe Gomez did actually get himself into that team on a regular basis, but then obviously goes off injured. I think it's at West Ham, isn't it, that he gets the injury to begin with. I mean, is that something you'd be looking at, Rich? Do you think Joe Gomez is maybe at the point now where you've got to put him in just to see what it looks like and see what happens? Or are you more in the camp that you give Konate a few more games?
Well, there's two ways of looking at this, but the first one is Joe Gomez certainly, you would think, suggested has earned the right to some sort of opportunity. You know, he could have come in at right back when Liverpool was struggling with right back issues and wasn't preferred there. Now they've got centre back issues. So what has he got to do to get himself in the reckoning? Basically, this is Liverpool's most longest serving player, hugely experienced and capable of playing pretty much anywhere across the back line. So I certainly would have no complaints if Gomez was given an opportunity to come in and see if he can fare any better than Konate else. However, on the flip side, what I have been calling for recently is a settled defence. So there may be some resistance on Slot's part to make another change in his back line. He's already taken Kerkez out of the firing line, and you look at that back four, and if you know, I don't know what the teams will pick, what teams you two picked last week, but I would imagine that the back four that started the match is the one that you would have chosen. So, and I'm, you know, we've had a couple of clean sheets recently, and that's something I've said that Liverpool really needed, and a bit stability in the back line. So if he does bring Gomez in, he's making another change in that back four, which could destabilize things a little more. Bear in mind that, you know, there's a different goalkeeper behind as well, and it's a different partner for Virgil van Dijk, albeit one that he knows very well. So I'm kind of, I don't want to say I'm sitting on the fence with it, even though it sounds like I am, but you know, I can certainly see a case for bringing Gomez in, but on the other side, I can also see a case for stability, you know, and trying to keep faith with the back four that you've currently got.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mention stability, because I think that is the team that everybody would have picked. It was the team that I predicted Arne Slot was going to pick and keep it the same from Real Madrid, not just at the back, but in terms of Florian Wirtz playing on the left. I thought that looked really good against Real Madrid. The midfield three, full of energy against Real Madrid, but then not quite so good against Manchester City. And I think that's a little bit of the confusion in terms of what it looks like at the moment for Liverpool, because as soon as there is a step forward in terms of one area, a little problem comes up somewhere else, or maybe there's a little bit of inconsistency in terms of those performances. And I suppose in terms of Joe Gomez specifically, the argument would be, well, he's probably not somebody that can play 3 times in a week. So if you do bring him in, he's then not going to be able to play every single game for a sustained period of time anyway. So, yeah, it's a tricky time, isn't it, Michael, in terms of team selection and just sort of getting the balance right between the balance in the team, but also that consistency as well. It almost feels like Arne Slot's tried quite a few things this season. There's an argument either way, I'd say, on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think Slot has got a lot of selection issues wrong this season, if I am honest. I think most people would agree with that, particularly around left back and the insistence on sticking with Milos Kerkez, despite how badly he was playing. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think we all probably more or less would have gone for that team on Sunday. I mean, you and I discussed in the last podcast whether it was Wirtz or Gakpo. I think that was the only real decision in the end. But yeah, look, I think that obviously Sunday was a disappointing performance, but I think it was interesting what Andy Robertson said after the game, that basically Man City would have beaten anyone with that sort of performance. And perhaps it's important not to get too downbeat about one. You know, obviously Liverpool didn't play well, but just one game. And I do think that is the case. And it obviously is a shame based on the fact that they've been building a little bit of momentum after the Villa and Real Madrid game, and immediately that's halted. And now you've got the big question marks back recurring and coming back over certain things. But I do think in the grand scheme of things, we shouldn't be making too much of a big deal of this City game just because City were so good. Although, as we say, performances do certainly need to improve for Liverpool.
Just chip in on that. Sorry. I'll be honest with you. When I left the ground, although obviously been well beaten, I wasn't that too overly disheartened, because I just thought, okay, we haven't played well there. Bad day at the office. City played really well. I spoke to some City fans outside the ground who said it was actually the best they played all season. So they've obviously raised the game for that game, and I just accept it for what it was. It's only since I've come away they've actually started to become more concerned about it. And one of the reasons of that is because I took a look at the Premier League form table. Now, that does not make good reading at all. So Liverpool are 18th. This is based on the last 6 games. Liverpool are 18th with 3 points from the last... I've read that wrong. It's actually 5 matches. Apologies. It could be 6, but I don't have that data in front of me. So
even worse if it was 6, wouldn't it?
It might be worse if it's 6. Yeah, in fact, I could probably adjust it very quickly actually, and I can tell you. But he got certainly 1 win in the last 5. It's just going to make it worse. It has made it worse. Yeah, I was right in the first place. It is 1 win in the last 6, so that's even worse. But they're still 18th in the form table. So below them are Fulham and Wolves over the last 6 matches, with Leeds United above them over the last 6 matches, having gained a point more. Now, that is concerning. So, there was noise around questioning Arne Slot, and then you go and get to really good performance against Aston Villa, important win, and then a really good result and performance against Real Madrid. Big backing for Arne Slot. And everything's rosy again. We look forward to Man City. So, although it might have been a bad day at the office, that form guide is not good at all. And that is certainly not sustainable.
No, certainly it's not. The only caveat I would add to that is that there has been quite a few fixtures in which you can make the argument that other teams will drop points in them as well. I mean, there's obviously City, there's Manchester United, who've found a little bit of form, possibly in part because they got the confidence of going to Liverpool and winning, and have kicked on a little bit since then. Crystal Palace had been in decent form. Obviously, they've played Real Madrid and Frankfurt and Galatasaray as well in the Champions League. I mean, obviously, I'm not making the case that that's an acceptable number of points or the number of points that Liverpool would have been aiming for. But Michael, do you think there's an argument that Liverpool have maybe had a difficult spell in terms of the fixtures they faced? Because I know Arne Slot has faced a little bit of criticism at times for excuse/explanation for why X has happened or whatever it might be. He has said quite a few times that Liverpool have played lots of away games in recent weeks. We're going to take a look in a minute at the games that are coming up for Liverpool. But, I mean, look, the form guide isn't good. There's a lot of red on it, and when you'd expect there to be a lot more green. But I do have some sympathy for his explanations to a certain degree, even if Liverpool do have to get better.
Yeah, I think you summed up pretty well there that you've got to take into account the opponents Liverpool have played when you look at that table, albeit that being 18th for 3 points isn't acceptable. Yeah, it's interesting that the away form has dropped off significantly. And of course, it was very good last season, wasn't it? And it's really not been so far this campaign. The one issue I would have, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but looking forward to those fixtures upcoming, is the big issue that Slot has raised recently is teams playing long balls, set pieces, running down the clock, those sorts of tactics. Well, they're the sorts of opponents Liverpool are going to face in these supposedly easier fixtures. And it was actually against Villa and Real Madrid, who opened up and played, that Liverpool had more success. So, yeah, that would be the concern. But I do think, listen, I actually, all as it is, I do think that there is a little bit of improvement in that. If you look at the last, we break the season down into chunks, that we had the first 4 before the first international break. We had 7 in between the first and second international break. Then we've had another 7, and now we've got the international break that's come. I think the last 7 fixtures probably contain Liverpool's 3 best performances of the season in Frankfurt, Villa, and Real Madrid. So that in itself is a little bit of an encouraging sign that slowly performance is on the way up. Ties back into the point I made when I spoke last, that the Man City game wasn't a good result, wasn't a good performance. It should have been better. But at the same time, let's take into perspective how good City were on the day. So while things are a little bit doom and gloom at the moment, I do think they're slowly on the upturn, I must say.
Just before we move on then to look at those fixtures, just a quick word from you, Rich, on Manchester City. How impressed were you with them? And obviously having seen Liverpool play Arsenal as well this season, who do you think is the favourite from this position in terms of the Premier League title? Because I'm assuming you don't think it's Liverpool.
I don't think it's Liverpool. And sadly, I don't share Michael's optimism. I wish I did. But things can change quite quickly, aren't they? I was all smiles after beating Real Madrid. But it's almost like Liverpool have had to, get back to winning ways. And now the next challenge is find any level of consistency. Bear in mind, they haven't drawn a Premier League game all season. 6 wins, 5 defeats. So when games are tough, we're not getting points out of them. You know what I mean? So that in itself is some sort of an issue. That is something the manager has got to resolve within his squad to when things aren't going your way is to get something out of a game, even if you can't win it. So you're dead right when I say I don't think Liverpool are favourites for it. And at this point in time, I'd just be happy with Champions League qualification. But there's still work to do on that. So things can change quickly, but until there's any level of consistency, I mean, you can just forget it, can't you? In terms of Man City, they were very impressive on Sunday. Doku was phenomenal, although I believe he is pretty inconsistent. From the City fans I spoke to, as I said, that was the best he's played all season. That they have looked heavily reliant on Erling Haaland. They looked less so on Sunday. But obviously in Haaland, they have a settled centre forward who they channel everything through. Liverpool have 2 expensive centre forwards that the manager is struggling to shoehorn into a team, which is something we haven't even touched on, but is also very concerning. I think City are going to be there or thereabouts. I don't know if they'll win it. I do think Arsenal, it could be their time, but if anyone was going to hunt them down, I think it's going to be Manchester City because they've got the know-how. They've certainly got the players. They've certainly got the manager. And it's just a case of pulling it all together. And if they keep or if they grow confidence from the performance they put in against Liverpool, then they're probably going to go on a decent run. And they're only 4 points behind Arsenal. It's nothing, is it, at this stage of the season? I mean, we haven't even hit Christmas yet. So that table could look a lot different after Christmas in the new year. And Man City may well be top of it. But what Liverpool need to do is make sure that they're not any further away from the top of it than they are now. And the good news is they have got the opportunity to do that, I think, with the fixtures that they've got coming up.
Just to quickly jump in, I think Arsenal will win it.
So do I, actually. So do I. But they do have a couple of difficult fixtures, I think, coming up in the next 2 or 3. They've got Tottenham and Chelsea, which I think will be interesting. But let's talk about those fixtures that Liverpool have got coming up. And so between now and when they play Arsenal in January, they've got Forest, PSV, West Ham, Sunderland, Leeds, Inter Milan in the Champions League, Brighton, Spurs, Wolves, Leeds again, and then Fulham. On paper, at least, Michael, it does feel like a much more favourable set of fixtures. I know you've just mentioned there about set pieces and directness and that kind of thing, but I mean, there's no easy games in the Premier League. It's a cliche, but it is true. You'd have to say, though, that you look at some of the names in that run, you've got to fancy Liverpool have got a better chance of maybe showing a better version of themselves. You know, Florian Wirtz, for example, must be looking at a couple of those teams, West Ham in particular. A lovely big pitch for him to go and find some passes and maybe get a bit of confidence. Other players as well, I'm sure, not just him, but it does look on paper, doesn't it, that Liverpool could find themselves getting a few points. And given how congested it is, I know they're 8th at the moment, of course, but there's about 5 or 6 teams who are within 3 or 4 points of each other. As Rich says there, the table could look very, very different by Christmas. And from a Liverpool perspective, you have to hope that that's the case.
Yeah, definitely. I do think those fixtures are certainly much nicer. There's no argument with that. I think Leeds twice. I mean, they're a side that look, it's kind of on a downward spiral at the moment, sadly for their perspective. I think Wolves are. I mean, you said there's no easy fixtures. Wolves is an easy fixture, definitely. And I think West Ham. Yeah, I think West Ham. Actually, a point on all of this is that it might actually work out not in Liverpool's favour that they had a tougher start to the season. Because take, for instance, Forest in the next game. Well, they've improved since they've got rid of Postecoglou and brought in Dyche. And you would say that who are the other team thinking of? West Ham have got better recently since changing manager. I wonder by the time that Liverpool play Leeds whether they could have changed manager and they could be on an upward turn. So that's one small element to consider. But yeah, those fixtures are certainly easier. And assuming that Liverpool do get the grips with this set piece, long ball approach, then you would expect the results to pick up. I think they will. Yeah, I'm pretty confident they will.
It's not really acceptable to be losing to these teams, is it? When you spent 400 million quid in the summer, is it? I mean, that's just the way it is. I know the players don't set their transfer values, but the fact is it's an astonishing amount of money. So losing to these sides just isn't acceptable, and I don't think it will be tolerated.
I think in terms of that as well, I mean, I'd say you'd look at PSV, you'd expect Liverpool to beat them at home. Obviously, Inter in Europe as well, going away to Milan is not going to be an easy one, but the fact that they've beaten Real Madrid takes a little bit of the pressure off that. I think what we've seen in the Champions League is that Liverpool can get results if they really need to. I'd like to see a little bit of a focus on just knuckling down and getting the points on the board in the Premier League. I think they're in a decent enough position, I'd say now, Rich, in terms of, you know, the Champions League form that they've shown, the points that they've got on the board. It is time, isn't it? You mentioned the word consistency a couple of times before. It feels like a time when Liverpool just need to sort of put the accelerator down, make sure that they're not too far away from the top 4. And by Christmas, you'd like to think that they can be a little bit more in that groove again.
Well, hopefully he's getting a little bit closer to working out what his best team is, because it's been pretty clear that hasn't been settled. And even on this show, we've spoken about possibly taking out the centre-back. So that it's still a work in progress, but that team can be settled purely by getting results, and the rest will take care of itself. and we won't have to talk about transfer fees then. But, Nottingham Forest at home, you've got to be looking to win that. PSV Eindhoven at home in the Champions League. As you say, pressure off a little bit in that one now after beating Real Madrid. You'd expect them to beat PSV at home. West Ham away is an away game, which is where Liverpool really need a win. And if there's anywhere they could get one, you would hope it would be somewhere like that, where they may not come in contact with the same sort of tactics that the likes of Brentford would deploy. And then Sunderland at home actually looks the trickiest one of the lot out of that one, based on how Sunderland have started the season. Whether they can keep that up remains to be seen. But there's sort of no evidence of them being a soft touch at all, is there? Anywhere around there. So a win against them would be expected, but would also be a good result. So yeah, and then Leeds. So the opportunity is there to string those wins together and rebuild confidence, and they need to do it because that form table is diabolical.
In terms of the squad and the players that are coming back as well, you mentioned there we don't know what the best team is at the moment. It almost gets a little bit more difficult with the fact that Isak is back. Obviously, Addison's going to be back after the international break, so that's a no-brainer to bring him back in. But there are one or two decisions as well out there for Arne Slot to make in terms of fitting all of this together. I wonder if that's the biggest question really that he's got in this next couple of weeks, Michael, because Isak and Ekitike, Gakpo and Wirtz, I know obviously there's going to be 3 games a week and they can't play all of them, but he's going to have to make some big decisions. And I suppose that probably is the biggest factor really in terms of how consistent Liverpool can be in the next few weeks. Is does he get those big calls right, or does he try and maybe do something that doesn't quite work again?
Yeah, well, it's funny because you would have gone into the City game saying that maybe he's finally stumbled upon a winning formula. He needs to stick, relatively close to that. And then, of course, I think I'm unstuck against City, but they don't look like a side at the moment that are going to benefit from lots of rotation, I have to say, certainly in terms of the performances week to week. They look like a team that could do with building a bit of on-field relations. I think it's, rotation is inevitable. It's definitely going to happen over a really busy Christmas period. And there are some difficult decisions to make. It is difficult to imagine where Alexander Isak gets into this team at the moment, which is just an incredible thing to say. I do think he'll start now. I think that within a couple of weeks of the season resuming, he will be the first choice number 9, assuming he stays fit, which I think is becoming a bit of a concern as well. But yeah, there's plenty of decisions to make, and I think he'll have to obviously solve them over the coming weeks. It's a good thing that they've got not many injuries at the moment, essentially 2, Leone and then Frimpong. I suspect Frimpong will be back at some point, won't be in the next couple of weeks. But just to add one last thing on the fixtures you were talking about, that period from when they come back until about mid-January or when the FA Cup third round is, that is a crucial period in the Premier League. There's about 7 or 8 games in a short spell of time. They need to pick up as many points as possible in that run. Otherwise, the season could seriously start to unravel. Yeah, absolutely. It's a big period, isn't it? The games that we've listed off there, you'd expect Liverpool to be able to get some points in, but then again, you'd have expected them to have got more points up to this point in the campaign. So we'll see what happens, but I think definitely some perspective required after that Manchester City game. It's easy to forget the couple of games that came before that, and hopefully Arne Slot has found a little bit of a winning formula, even if Alexander Isak is about to complicate that a little bit. But I think we'll leave it there for this week. Thank you to Michael and to you as well, Rich, for joining me, to you guys at home as well, as ever, for watching and for listening. That's been your Liverpool.com podcast for this week. We'll be back next week right here on the Blood Red channel.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo, giving you the inside track on all the big talking points from Anfield.